The sound of a shotgun being cocked echoed through the small parlor, silencing everyone present as Hannah Summers stared down the barrel at Judge Wilson and her late husband's brother, Edwin Summers. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve remained firm as she stood before the two men who were attempting to force her into a marriage she wanted no part of. "I will not marry him," Hannah declared, her voice stronger than she felt. "Thomas has only been in the ground for 3 months. This is nothing but a scheme to take my ranch." It was 1878 in Llano, Texas, and Hannah Summers, at 26 years old, was fighting to maintain control of the prosperous cattle ranch her husband had built before a cattle rustler's bullet took his life. According to Thomas's will, Hannah inherited everything, a fact that had infuriated his younger brother Edwin, who believed the Double S Ranch should rightfully be his. Judge Wilson, a portly man with a bushy gray mustache and beady eyes, raised his hands placatingly. "Now, Mrs. Summers, be reasonable. The law allows for this arrangement. Your brother-in-law has a legitimate claim to protect the family interests." Edwin, a thin man with mean eyes that never quite matched his forced smile, stepped forward cautiously. "Hannah, you can't manage that ranch alone. As your husband, I can ensure the Double S stays in the Summers family where it belongs. It's what Thomas would have wanted." "Thomas would have wanted you to respect his will," Hannah spat, keeping the shotgun steady. "He left the ranch to me, not you." Edwin's smile faltered. "A woman can't run a cattle operation. Everyone knows that. You'll run it into the ground by winter." "I've been running it alongside Thomas for 7 years, Hannah countered. "I know more about cattle than you ever will, Edwin." Judge Wilson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Summers, I understand your distress, but please lower that weapon. This marriage arrangement has been approved by the county court. Mr. Edwin Summers has legal standing in this matter, given the unusual circumstances of a woman holding such significant property." Hannah's eyes narrowed. "How much did he pay you, Judge? What was the price for selling a widow into marriage?" The judge's face reddened. "That is quite enough. The ceremony will take place on Saturday. If you refuse, the court will have no choice but to reassess the inheritance arrangement. The law is clear about a woman's capacity to manage such holdings." The shotgun wavered in Hannah's grip. She knew they were boxing her in. In 3 days, she was expected to marry a man she despised, a man who had coveted her husband's land for years, and now seemed determined to claim her along with it. "You have until Saturday to reconsider your approach to this situation," Judge Wilson said, gathering his papers. "I suggest you use the time wisely, Mrs. Summers." After the men had gone, Hannah collapsed into a chair, the shotgun falling to her lap. Tears streamed down her face as reality set in. Without Thomas's protection, she was vulnerable to the machinations of men like Edwin and the corrupt officials he had in his pocket. The ranch hands were loyal to her, but they couldn't stand against the law. Hannah wiped her tears, determination hardening her green eyes. She would not marry Edwin. She would not surrender Thomas's legacy or herself without a fight. But what could she do against the full weight of the law and the societal expectations that deemed a woman incapable of independence? As darkness fell over the ranch house, Hannah made her decision. She would leave Llano. Disappear before the forced marriage could take place. She had some money saved, enough to start over somewhere far from Texas, perhaps in California or even Oregon. It would mean abandoning the ranch she loved, but better that than becoming Edwin's possession. Hannah spent the night packing essential items into a single trunk: clothes, a few precious keepsakes, and the money she had managed to hide away. By morning, she had a plan. She would take the noon stage to Austin, then travel west. With luck, Edwin wouldn't discover her absence until the wedding day, giving her precious time to put distance between them. What Hannah didn't account for was Edwin's suspicion. He arrived at the ranch shortly after sunrise, claiming he wanted to discuss wedding arrangements. Instead, his shrewd eyes took in the signs of her planned departure: the missing photographs from the mantel, the trunk partially visible in her bedroom. Planning a trip, sister dear. Edwin's voice dripped with false concern. Hannah's heart raced. Just organizing some things. I think not. Edwin closed the parlor door behind him. You're running away, aren't you? That would be most unwise. I won't marry you, Edwin, Hannah said, backing away. You don't have a choice. He advanced toward her. By Saturday, you'll be my wife, and everything Thomas built will finally be mine. As it should have been all along. Thomas never wanted you to have the ranch because he knew what kind of man you are, Hannah shot back. Edwin's face twisted with anger. Thomas was a fool who got himself killed, and now you'll pay for his mistakes. He lunged forward, grabbing Hannah's wrist. She struggled, crying out in pain as his fingers dug into her skin. With her free hand, she reached for a heavy brass candlestick on the side table and swung it at Edwin's head. The impact wasn't enough to knock him unconscious, but it stunned him, allowing Hannah to break free. She ran for the door, but Edwin recovered quickly, tackling her to the ground. You're not going anywhere, he snarled, pinning her down. Just then, the door burst open. A tall figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the morning sun. I believe the lady wants you to let her go, said a deep, unfamiliar voice. Edwin looked up, momentarily distracted. This doesn't concern you, stranger. This is family business. The man stepped fully into the room, revealing himself to be a cowboy in his early 30s, with a weathered face, piercing blue eyes, and a revolver pointed directly at Edwin. When a man puts his hands on a woman against her will, it becomes everybody's business, the cowboy replied. Now, I'll say it one more time, let her go. Edwin hesitated, then slowly released Hannah and stood up, raising his hands. You're making a mistake, mister. I'm Edwin Summers, and this is my property. Not according to the sign out front, the cowboy said. Says Double S Ranch Thomas and Hannah Summers. I don't see your name anywhere on it. Hannah scrambled to her feet, putting distance between herself and Edwin. Who are you? She asked the stranger. Lucas Thornton, madam, he replied, tipping his hat with his free hand while keeping the gun trained on Edwin. Was passing by, looking for work, when I heard the commotion. Edwin's eyes darted between Hannah and Lucas. This woman is my brother's widow. We're to be married on Saturday. Doesn't look like a happy bride-to-be to me, Lucas observed. I'm being forced into this marriage, Hannah explained quickly. My husband left me this ranch, and Edwin is trying to take it by marrying me against my will. Lucas's jaw tightened. Is that so? She's distraught and not thinking clearly, Edwin argued. Women aren't equipped to handle such matters. I'd say she handled that candlestick just fine, Lucas remarked with a hint of a smile. Now, Mr. Summers, I suggest you leave the lady alone and go about your business elsewhere. Edwin's face reddened with anger. You can't threaten me on my own property. Again, not your property, Lucas said calmly. And this isn't a threat. It's a suggestion, one I strongly recommend you take. For a moment, it seemed Edwin might challenge the cowboy, but self-preservation won out. This isn't over, he hissed at Hannah. The law is on my side. He backed toward the door, adding, and you, stranger, you'd best watch yourself. You don't know who you're dealing with in Lano. After Edwin had gone, Lucas holstered his revolver and turned to Hannah. Are you all right, madam? Hannah nodded, though her wrist throbbed where Edwin had grabbed her. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Your timing was fortunate. Lucas, please, he said. And I'm sorry I didn't arrive sooner. Seems like you're in quite a situation. Hannah sank into a chair, suddenly overwhelmed. He's right about one thing: the law is on his side. Judge Wilson has already approved the marriage arrangement. According to them, a woman can't manage a cattle ranch alone, so my brother-in-law has the right to claim me along with the property. Lucas frowned. That doesn't sound right. It's not right, but it's legal, Hannah said bitterly. I was planning to leave run away before the wedding, but Edwin suspected something. Now he'll be watching me. Lucas considered this. You said the wedding's on Saturday. That gives us 3 days. Us? Hannah looked up at him in surprise. If you're set on leaving, I'd be willing to help, Lucas offered. I've got experience moving through territory without being noticed. Hannah studied him cautiously. He was tall and lean, with a face hardened by sun and wind. His clothes were travel-worn but clean, and though he carried weapons, there was something in his blue eyes that inspired trust rather than fear. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Lucas removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair. My mother was forced into marriage after my father died. She didn't have anyone to help her escape. His voice carried an old pain. I was too young to do anything then. I'm not too young now. Hannah felt a rush of gratitude mixed with caution. I can pay you for your help, she offered. Lucas shook his head. I don't want your money, Mrs. Summers, but I am looking for honest work. If helping you means I've made a friend who might put in a good word somewhere down the line, that's payment enough. Hannah considered her options. She could trust this stranger, this Lucas Thornton, who had already intervened once on her behalf, or she could try to escape on her own with Edwin now on high alert. The choice seemed clear. Call me Hannah, she said, extending her hand. And I think I could use a friend right now, Mr. Thornton. Lucas took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. Just Lucas, please. Now let's figure out how to get you away from here safely. Over the next few hours, Hannah and Lucas formulated a plan. Hannah couldn't simply disappear. Edwin would raise the alarm immediately, possibly claiming she had been kidnapped. Instead, they needed to create a diversion, a reason for her to be away from the ranch temporarily, giving them time to put distance between themselves and Lano before anyone realized she wasn't coming back. There's a cattle auction in San Antonio on Friday, Hannah explained. I could claim I'm going to sell some of our stock before the wedding. Edwin wouldn't like it, but it would give me a legitimate reason to leave town for at least a day. But you wouldn't go to San Antonio, Lucas nodded, understanding. Instead, we'd head in another direction altogether. Exactly. By the time Edwin or the judge realized I wasn't coming back for the wedding, we could be well on our way to wherever we decide to go. Lucas considered this. It could work, but we'd need to be careful about who knows your plans. If Edwin suspects anything, he might try to stop you from leaving at all. I can trust my foreman, Charlie Welch, Hannah said. He's been with the ranch since Thomas first bought it. He doesn't approve of Edwin or this forced marriage. Good. We'll need someone on the inside, Lucas agreed. Now, where were you planning to go once you got away? Hannah hesitated. I hadn't gotten that far in my planning. Somewhere west, I thought. California, maybe. California's a long journey, especially for a woman traveling alone, Lucas cautioned. There's safer options that still get you out of Edwin's reach. I know some good folks in Colorado mining town called Silver Creek. It's growing fast, needs all sorts of businesses. With the money from selling your cattle, you could set up something new there. Colorado, Hannah repeated, considering. That could work, but what about you? You said you were looking for work. Lucas smiled slightly. I go where the work is, madam. Right now, that seems to be helping you disappear into the night. By evening, their plan was set. Hannah would announce her intention to take some cattle to the San Antonio auction. Lucas would be hired on as temporary help for the drive. They would leave Thursday morning, ostensibly for San Antonio, but would instead turn north toward Colorado once they were beyond Lano's borders. Charlie Welch, the grizzled foreman who had served the ranch faithfully for years, readily agreed to help when Hannah explained the situation. "Never did trust that brother of Mr. Thomas's," Charlie said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Always had his eye on what wasn't his. Don't you worry about the ranch, Mrs. Summers. I'll keep it running best I can until you figure out what you want to do with it." "Thank you, Charlie," Hannah said, genuinely moved. "I may have to sell it eventually, but at least this way it will be my choice. And if Edwin comes sniffing around after you're gone, tell him the truth that I went to the cattle auction," Hannah instructed. "By the time he realizes I'm not coming back, it'll be too late." Charlie nodded, then turned his attention to Lucas. "And you, Thornton, you best take good care of Mrs. Summers. She's had enough trouble without adding more." "You have my word," Lucas promised solemnly. "I'll see her safely to where she's going." As they prepared for their departure, Hannah found herself studying Lucas when he wasn't looking. There was something compelling about him, a quiet strength, a sense of principle that reminded her of Thomas. But where Thomas had been open and easy to read, Lucas seemed to carry secrets behind those blue eyes. On Wednesday afternoon, as expected, Edwin arrived at the ranch, furious about Hannah's plans to sell cattle before the wedding. "Those cattle aren't yours to sell anymore," he shouted. "Once we're married, all decisions about the ranch will be mine to make." "We're not married yet," Hannah replied calmly, "and I need money of my own, unless you're planning to be a generous husband." Edwin's face twisted. "You won't need money of your own. I'll provide everything you require." "Like a jailer provides for his prisoner," Hannah challenged. Edwin stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Don't push me, Hannah. I've been patient because you're still in mourning, but my patience has limits. Cancel this auction business and focus on preparing for our wedding." "The cattle are already being rounded up," Hannah lied smoothly. In reality, they had selected only a small herd, enough to sell for traveling money without raising suspicion. "The arrangements are made. I'll be back in time for the ceremony." Edwin looked as though he wanted to argue further but seemed to think better of it. "Fine. But I'm sending one of my men with you just to help, of course." Hannah's heart sank. Having one of Edwin's men along would ruin everything. "That's not necessary. I've hired temporary help." "Who?" At that moment, Lucas entered the house, having just come from the barn. "Mrs. Summers, the horses are ready for tomorrow's drive," he said, then pretended to notice Edwin for the first time. "Oh, pardon me. I didn't realize you had company." Edwin's eyes narrowed as he recognized the cowboy who had pulled a gun on him. "You hired him, the drifter who threatened me." "Mr. Thornton has experience with cattle drives," Hannah said evenly. "And he didn't threaten you, he merely suggested you stop manhandling me." Edwin glared at Lucas. "I don't want this man working on my ranch." "It's not your ranch yet," Hannah reminded him, "and Mr. Thornton stays. He's already been paid." Lucas stood silently, his posture relaxed but alert, ready to intervene if Edwin's temper flared again. Something in his stance must have given Edwin pause, for after a moment of tense silence, the man backed down. "Have it your way for now," Edwin said. "But when you return, things will change." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "And I'll be checking with the auction master in San Antonio to make sure you arrived safely. For your own protection, of course." After Edwin left, Hannah let out a shaky breath. "He suspects something." "Maybe," Lucas agreed, "but he can't prove anything. And by the time he realizes you're not in San Antonio, we'll be long gone." That night, Hannah could barely sleep. Tomorrow would change everything. She would leave behind the home she had built with Thomas, the life she had known, for an uncertain future in a distant place. But as frightening as that prospect was, staying and becoming Edwin's wife was far worse. Before dawn on Thursday, Hannah stood in the parlor one last time, gazing at the portrait of Thomas that hung above the fireplace. She had decided to leave it behind. It was too bulky to transport, and she carried her memories of him in her heart. "I'm sorry I couldn't keep the ranch," she whispered to the painting, "but I know you wouldn't want me to sacrifice my freedom for it." She was startled by Lucas's quiet voice behind her. "Your husband looks like he was a good man." Hannah turned, nodding. "He was. Kind, honest, hardworking. We had our share of troubles, but we faced them together." "You loved him very much," Lucas observed. "I did. We were married for 7 years. Hannah touched her wedding ring, which she still wore. "We wanted children, but it never happened for us." Lucas didn't press further, respecting the privacy of her grief. "The horses are ready. We should leave soon if we want to be well on our way before full light." Hannah took one last look at Thomas's portrait, then squared her shoulders. "I'm ready." The small cattle drive, just 20 head. Enough to justify the trip to an auction, but not so many as to require a large crew, set out, as the first hint of dawn colored the eastern sky. Besides Hannah and Lucas, only 2 ranch hands accompanied them. Young Billy Foster and veteran cowhand Hank Miller, both loyal to Hannah and sworn to secrecy about her true plans. They headed south initially, as if truly bound for San Antonio. Only once they were well away from Llano would they change course, sending Billy and Hank back with a story about Hannah continuing to the auction with Lucas while they returned to help with ranch duties. The morning passed quietly as they drove the cattle across the rolling Texas landscape. Hannah rode confidently, her skills as a rancher evident in the way she handled her horse and directed the small herd. Lucas found himself impressed and increasingly curious about this determined widow. "How did you learn to handle cattle so well?" he asked during a brief rest to water the animals at a small stream. Hannah smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. We had some livestock, though nothing like this ranch. When I married Thomas and moved here, I made it my business to learn everything about cattle ranching. Some of the hands were skeptical at first, a woman wanting to ride and work alongside them, but Thomas always supported me. He sounds like a wise man." He was. Hannah's smile faded. Edwin never understood. He thought a woman's place was in the house, not on horseback. That's partly why Thomas left him out of the ranch business. He knew Edwin would never respect what we built together. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "And now Edwin thinks he can take by force what his brother wouldn't give him freely." "Exactly." Hannah looked at Lucas curiously. "What about you? You said you've been moving around, looking for work. Where are you from originally?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. "I was born in Kentucky. My father had a small horse farm there. After he died and my mother was remarried, I left home. I was 16. Been moving around since then, working ranches from Texas to Montana." "That's a long time on the move," Hannah observed. "Don't you ever want to settle somewhere?" A shadow crossed Lucas's face. "I thought I might once. It didn't work out." Hannah sensed there was more to that story, but like Lucas had respected her privacy about Thomas, she didn't press for details. By midday, they had reached the spot where they would part ways with Billy and Hank. The young men were to return to the ranch with a letter from Hannah to Charlie, explaining that she had decided to stay in San Antonio for a few extra days to arrange the sale of more cattle, a plausible excuse that would buy them additional time before Edwin became suspicious. "You boys take care now," Hannah said, handing them the sealed letter. "And thank you for your help." "You be careful, Mrs. Summers," Hank said gruffly. "That Edwin is a mean one. Wouldn't put it past him to come looking for you once he figures things out." "By then, we'll be well out of his reach," Lucas assured them. "Just stick to the story if anyone asks." After the ranch hands departed, Hannah and Lucas turned the small herd north, away from the road to San Antonio and toward the distant promise of Colorado. They would sell the cattle at the first opportunity, using the money to fund their journey. As they rode side by side, Hannah felt a strange mixture of emotions: fear of the unknown future, grief at leaving behind the home she had shared with Thomas, but also a surprising sense of freedom. For the first time since Thomas's death, she was taking control of her own destiny. Lucas seemed to sense her thoughts. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly. Hannah shook her head. "No, just taking stock. Everything I've known for the past 7 years is behind me now." "Not everything," Lucas said. "You still have your courage, your determination. Those go with you wherever you are." Hannah glanced at him, surprised by the insight. "Thank you, that helps." They continued northward, making good time with the small herd. By evening, they had put considerable distance between themselves and Leno. They made camp in a protected hollow near a small creek. The cattle settled for the night under the watchful eye of Lucas's experienced cow dog, Rusty. As they sat by the campfire, eating a simple meal of beans and bacon, Hannah found herself studying Lucas again. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, less weathered. She realized he was younger than she had initially thought, probably not yet 30. "How old are you, Lucas?" she asked suddenly. He looked up, surprised by the question. 29 next month. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Hannah said. "You seem older sometimes, in the way you talk, the way you handle things." Lucas poked at the fire with a stick. "I grew up fast, I suppose." "Because of what happened with your mother," he nodded slowly. "That and other things." Hannah waited, giving him space to elaborate if he chose. After a long moment, he continued. "After my father died, things were hard. The farm wasn't doing well. My mother struggled to keep it going. Then this man came along, Walter Blackstone. Wealthy landowner, charming when he wanted to be. He courted my mother, promised to take care of her, me and my younger sister." Lucas's jaw tightened at the memory. Once they were married, everything changed. He was cruel, controlling. Wouldn't let my mother make any decisions, treated her like property. When I tried to defend her, he'd beat me. My sister and I lived in fear of his temper. Hannah's heart ached for the young boy he had been. "That's why you intervened when you saw Edwin grabbing me." "I recognized the look in your eyes," Lucas admitted. "The same look my mother had trapped with no way out." He stared into the fire. "When I was 16, after a particularly bad beating, I ran away. I've always regretted leaving my mother and sister behind, but I was just a boy. I didn't know how to help them." "What happened to them?" Hannah asked gently. Lucas's expression grew distant. "My sister wrote to me years later. Our mother died when I was 19, illness," the letter said, "but I've always wondered. My sister married young just to escape that house. Last I heard, she was living in Ohio with her husband." "And Blackstone, still alive as far as I know," Lucas said, his voice hardening. "Still owning the land that should have been my father's legacy." Hannah understood then why he had been so willing to help her. He was, in a way, helping the mother he couldn't save years ago. "Is that why you never settled down? Because of what happened?" Lucas considered the question. "Partly. I did try once, about 5 years ago. There was a woman, Rebecca. We were going to start a horse ranch together in Wyoming." "What happened?" Hannah asked when he fell silent. "Fever took her before we could marry," Lucas said simply, the pain still evident in his voice despite the years. "After that, I went back to drifting." Seemed easier than staying in one place with all those memories. Hannah understood that feeling all too well. The ranch she had just left was filled with memories of Thomas, both joyful and painful. "I'm sorry about Rebecca," she said softly. Lucas nodded his acknowledgement. "Life doesn't always go as planned, But sometimes when one door closes, another opens. He looked at her across the fire. Like finding you when you needed help. Maybe that's where I was meant to be. Hannah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the campfire. For a moment, she almost reached across to touch his hand, but something held her back, perhaps loyalty to Thomas's memory, or simply the newness of these stirring feelings. "We should get some rest," she said instead. "We have a long journey ahead." Lucas agreed, and they settled into their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. As Hannah drifted toward sleep, she realized that for the first time since Thomas's death, she was thinking more about the future than the past. The next morning dawned clear and cool. They broke camp early, continuing their northward journey. Lucas estimated it would take them at least 2 weeks to reach Colorado, longer if they encountered difficulties along the way. "There's a small town about a day's ride from here," Lucas explained as they rode. "Clayton's Crossing. We can sell the cattle there and get supplies for the rest of the journey." Hannah nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. "Do you think Edwin has realized I'm not going to San Antonio yet?" "Probably not," Lucas reassured her. "Your letter to Charlie buys us time. And even when Edwin does figure it out, he won't know which way we've gone." Hannah wasn't entirely convinced. "Edwin isn't stupid. He's crafty and determined." "So are we," Lucas said with a confidence that bolstered her spirits. "Besides, we have a head start and knowledge he doesn't have." By late afternoon, they spotted Clayton's Crossing in the distance, a modest collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. As they approached, Hannah noticed Lucas growing tense, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Just being cautious," he replied. "Small towns can be friendly or hostile, depending on who you meet. Better to be prepared." The town proved to be more welcoming than suspicious. The local cattle buyer, Mr. Jenkins, offered a fair price for their small herd, and the general store had all the supplies they needed for their journey. They took rooms at the town's only hotel, small but clean accommodations that felt luxurious after a night on the hard ground. While Lucas arranged for fresh horses, Hannah visited the town's modest dress shop, exchanging her recognizable riding clothes for simpler, more practical garments. On impulse, she also purchased a plain silver ring to replace her wedding band, which she carefully wrapped and tucked into her belongings. If they were to avoid raising questions, it seemed prudent to appear as husband and wife on their travels. When she explained this reasoning to Lucas over dinner at the hotel's small restaurant, he looked surprised but nodded in agreement. "It's sensible," he said. "Two people traveling together would draw less attention as a married couple." He hesitated, then added, "Though I should warn you, I'm not much for play acting." Hannah smiled. "Neither am I, but it's safer this way." After dinner, as they sat in the hotel's small parlor, Hannah noticed Lucas studying a worn map he'd purchased at the general store. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "The direct route to Colorado would take us through some well-traveled areas. If Edwin does send someone after you, that's where they'd look first." Hannah leaned closer to see the map. "You're suggesting an alternative route?" Lucas nodded. "West a bit, then north through less populated territory. It would add a few days to our journey but make us harder to track." "You really think Edwin would come after me himself?" Lucas looked up, his blue eyes serious. "A man like that, used to taking what he wants. Yes, I think he might. Especially with a ranch at stake." Hannah considered this. "Then we take the longer route." They left Clayton's Crossing early the next morning, their saddlebags laden with supplies, heading west as Lucas had suggested. The terrain gradually changed, becoming more rugged and less hospitable. Hannah, despite her experience on the ranch, found the long hours in the saddle increasingly challenging. By their third day on this new route, Lucas noticed her discomfort. "We can rest longer if you need to," he offered during their midday break. Hannah shook her head stubbornly. "I'm fine." "The sooner we reach Colorado, the better." Lucas studied her with concern. "There's no shame in admitting when you need rest, Hannah. This isn't about proving anything." "Isn't it?" she challenged. "A woman alone in the world has to prove herself constantly, Lucas." "You of all people should understand that," he conceded with a nod. "Fair enough, but pushing yourself to exhaustion won't help either of us. We still have a long journey ahead." Hannah knew he was right, though she was reluctant to admit it. "One more hour, then we'll make camp early today." Lucas agreed, and they continued on their way. True to his word, he called a halt earlier than usual, selecting a sheltered spot near a small spring for their camp. As Hannah attended to her horse, she felt Lucas's eyes on her. "What?" she asked, a bit defensively. "You remind me of someone," he said with a slight smile, "who, myself, when I was younger." Lucas began gathering wood for their fire. "Too stubborn to admit when I needed help, always trying to prove I could handle everything alone." Hannah's defenses softened. "And now?" "Now I know better," Lucas said simply. "There's no weakness in accepting help when it's offered freely." That evening, as they sat by the campfire sharing a meal of rabbit that Lucas had managed to shoot, Hannah found herself relaxing for the first time in days. The constant fear of pursuit had taken its toll, keeping her tense and watchful. But here, in this quiet moment with Lucas, she felt almost at peace. "Tell me about Silver Creek," she said, curious about their destination. "You mentioned you know people there." Lucas nodded. "It's a mining town primarily, but growing fast. Silver was discovered there about 5 years ago. Not a huge strike, but enough to sustain the town. It's got a different feel than most mining camps, more families, more businesses beyond just saloons and brothels." "And your friends there?" "The Millers, David and Sarah. He runs the livery stable, she has a small bakery. Good folks. They've been trying to convince me to settle there for years." Hannah considered this. "And what would I do in Silver Creek? I know ranching, not mining or baking." "The town's growing," Lucas said. "Needs all sorts of businesses. With your experience managing the ranch, you could start something of your own, a general store perhaps, or even a small cattle operation outside town." The idea was appealing, being truly independent, building something new that was entirely her own. "It sounds promising," Hannah admitted. As they talked into the evening, Hannah found herself sharing stories of her life with Thomas, memories she had kept locked away since his death. Lucas listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest, occasionally sharing stories of his own travels in return. There was an ease between them that Hannah hadn't expected, a comfortable companionship that made the hardships of their journey more bearable. As the fire burned low, she realized she was genuinely enjoying his company, not merely tolerating it out of necessity. The next morning brought clouds and the threat of rain. They packed up quickly, hoping to cover as much ground as possible before the weather turned. Lucas led them through increasingly rough country, following game trails and dry creek beds rather than established roads. "Are you sure we're still headed the right way?" Hannah asked after several hours of slow progress through dense brush. "Trust me," Lucas said with a confidence that somehow reassured her. "I've traveled through worse than this." By midday, the rain began, a steady, soaking downpour that quickly turned the ground to mud and reduced visibility to mere yards. Lucas called a halt beneath the shelter of a rocky overhang where they huddled, cold and wet, watching the deluge. "We may need to wait it out," Lucas said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Pushing on in this would be foolish." Hannah nodded, shivering slightly despite her rain slicker. Lucas noticed and removed his own coat, draping it around her shoulders for extra warmth. "You'll get soaked," she protested. "I've been wetter," he said with a wry smile. "Besides, you're shaking." The simple gesture of kindness touched Hannah deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. As they waited out the storm, sitting close together for warmth, Hannah found herself increasingly aware of Lucas as a man, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled, the gentle strength in hands that had clearly known hard work. These feelings both confused and frightened her. Thomas had been dead less than 4 months. Was it disloyal to notice another man so soon? And yet, there was something about Lucas Thornton that drew her, something beyond his timely rescue or his willingness to help her escape. The rain continued well into the evening, forcing them to make camp beneath the rocky overhang. With no dry wood for a fire, they ate cold rations and huddled in their damp bedrolls, trying to find what comfort they could. "Tell me something," Hannah said into the darkness, seeking distraction from the cold and her conflicted feelings. "If you could settle anywhere, do anything, what would you choose?" Lucas was quiet for so long that Hannah thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he answered, "I'd have a horse ranch, somewhere with good grazing land and plenty of water. I've always had a way with horses, understanding them, training them. Like your father's farm in Kentucky, similar but bigger, and mine." There was a note of longing in his voice. "What about you? If you could choose anything, now that you're free to decide?" Hannah considered the question seriously. "I'd want a home of my own, not as big as the ranch, something I could manage myself. And I'd want to be part of a community, not isolated." She paused, then added more softly, "And someday, I'd still like to have children." The admission felt intimate in the darkness, revealing a dream she had almost given up after Thomas's death. "That's a good dream," Lucas said, his voice warm. "One worth holding on to." By morning, the rain had stopped, though the skies remained overcast. They continued their journey through mud and swollen streams, making slower progress than planned but steadily moving northward. 4 days later, they crossed into Colorado territory, the landscape changing dramatically as the plains gave way to foothills and distant mountains. Hannah found herself enchanted by the beauty of this new country, the clear air, the stunning vistas, the sense of possibility that seemed to permeate everything. "It's beautiful," she breathed as they paused at the crest of a hill, looking out over a sweeping valley below. "Wait until you see the mountains up close," Lucas said, clearly pleased by her reaction. "There's nothing like it." As they rode side by side down into the valley, Hannah realized something had changed between them during their journey. The initial wariness had given way to trust, and trust had blossomed into friendship. And now, there was something more unspoken but increasingly undeniable growing between them. When Lucas smiled at her, her heart quickened in a way it hadn't since she first met Thomas. When their hands accidentally touched as they shared meals or set up camp, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the campfire. These feelings both excited and terrified her. They seemed too soon, too unexpected, and yet too powerful to ignore. That evening, as they made camp in a protected grove of aspen trees, Hannah found herself watching Lucas as he tended the horses. The care and gentleness in his movements, the quiet competence with which he handled the animals, spoke volumes about his character. When he returned to the fire, he caught her looking and raised an eyebrow in question. "Just thinking," she said, not quite ready to share her thoughts. "About," he prompted, settling beside her. "The future," Hannah admitted. "Silver Creek, what I'll do once we get there." Lucas nodded. "Having second thoughts?" "No, not exactly, just realizing how much has changed in such a short time." She looked at him directly. 2 weeks ago, I was about to be forced into marriage with a man I despise. Now I'm halfway to Colorado with a man I barely knew then but who has risked everything to help me." Lucas held her gaze. "Do you regret it?" "Not for a moment," Hannah said honestly. "I just wonder sometimes, why did you really help me? Was it only because of what happened to your mother?" Lucas considered this, his blue eyes thoughtful in the firelight. "That was part of it, yes. But there was something else, something about you. Your courage, your determination. From the moment I saw you standing up to Edwin, I knew you were someone worth helping." The sincerity in his voice moved her. Without thinking, Hannah reached out and placed her hand over his. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for helping me escape, but for making me feel like I have choices again, like I have a future." Lucas turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You do have a future, Hannah, a bright one." For a moment it seemed he might say more, might lean closer, but instead he gently squeezed her hand and then released it, rising to his feet. "We should get some rest. We're still a good 5 days from Silver Creek." That night, Hannah's dreams were filled with conflicting images: Thomas smiling at her across their ranch table, Edwin's angry face as he tried to claim her, and Lucas, his blue eyes warm with something more than friendship. She woke feeling unsettled yet strangely hopeful, as if some new understanding was just beyond her reach. The next few days brought them deeper into Colorado's mountain country. The trails became steeper, the air cooler and thinner, the views increasingly spectacular. Hannah, having spent most of her life in Texas and Missouri, was entranced by the towering pines, crystal-clear streams, and glimpses of snow-capped peaks in the distance. Lucas, seeing her delight, began pointing out features of the landscape, sharing knowledge gained from his previous travels through the territory. His evident love for this country was infectious, and Hannah found herself looking forward to making it her home. On their 10th day since leaving Clayton's Crossing, disaster nearly struck. As they navigated a narrow trail along a steep hillside, Hannah's horse stepped into a hidden hole, stumbling badly. The animal recovered its footing, but the sudden movement sent Hannah sliding from her saddle. She might have fallen down the steep slope if Lucas hadn't reacted with lightning speed, grabbing her arm and pulling her to safety. For a moment, they stood frozen, Hannah pressed against Lucas's chest, his arms around her, both of them breathing hard from the sudden surge of adrenaline. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. Hannah nodded, unable to speak, acutely aware of his closeness, the solid strength of him, the rapid beating of his heart against her cheek. When she finally looked up, their faces were inches apart, his eyes dark with an emotion that mirrored her own confused feelings. For one breathless moment, it seemed he might kiss her. Instead, he slowly released her, helping her steady herself on the narrow trail. "Thank you," Hannah managed, her voice uneven. "That was close." Lucas nodded, his expression guarded once more. "We should be more careful on these mountain trails, maybe walk the horses for a while." The moment had passed, but something had changed between them, a boundary crossed, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was quite ready to name. That evening, their conversation around the campfire was more subdued than usual, each lost in private thoughts. Hannah found herself wondering what might have happened if Lucas had kissed her on that hillside. Would she have welcomed it? Rejected it? She honestly wasn't sure. Part of her, the part still grieving for Thomas, felt guilty for even considering such feelings for another man. But another part, the part that had been slowly awakening during this journey, wondered if perhaps life was offering her a second chance at happiness. The next morning, Lucas announced they were entering more populated territory and would soon reach a trading post where they could replenish their supplies. "We should continue with our married couple disguise," he suggested. "It's safer, especially since we're getting closer to where people might have heard about a missing widow from Texas. Hannah agreed, though the pretense now felt more charged than it had before, weighted with unacknowledged feelings. The trading post turned out to be a cluster of rough buildings surrounding a general store that served trappers, prospectors, and the occasional settler passing through. As they approached, Lucas discreetly handed Hannah the plain silver ring she had purchased in Clayton's Crossing. "Mrs. Thornton," he said with a formality that didn't quite hide his discomfort with the deception. Hannah slipped on the ring, feeling strangely affected by the simple act. "Mr. Thornton," she replied, attempting a lightness she didn't quite feel. Inside the general store, they were greeted by a burly, bearded man who introduced himself as Jeb Hollister, the proprietor. His curious eyes took in their travel-worn appearance. "Passing through or settling?" he asked as he filled their order for supplies. "Heading to Silver Creek," Lucas replied easily. "My wife has family there." Hannah played along, smiling and nodding at appropriate moments as Lucas chatted with the storekeeper, gathering information about trail conditions and any news from Silver Creek. "Haven't heard much lately," Hollister admitted. "Road's been quiet past week or so, what with the rumors of Ute movement up north." Lucas frowned. "Any trouble expected?" "Nah, just talk mostly. Army's got things settled far as I know." Hollister leaned across the counter confidentially. "Though you might want to take the lower trail past Black Bear Ridge just to be safe. Cuts a day off your journey too." As they prepared to leave, Hollister mentioned almost casually, "Had a fella through here couple days back, asking after a woman and man traveling together. Texas accent. Said he was looking for his sister who'd run off with some no-account drifter." Hannah froze, her heart suddenly racing. Lucas's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. "That's so?" Lucas asked, his tone deliberately disinterested. "Lots of people on the move these days." "True enough," Hollister agreed, seeming not to notice Hannah's reaction. "Told him I hadn't seen anyone matching his description. Seemed mighty determined, though." Outside the store, once they were out of earshot, Hannah whispered, "Edwin, it has to be." Lucas nodded grimly. "Sounds like it. He's ahead of us somehow." "But how?" "We took the longer route specifically to avoid the main trails." "He must have guessed we'd head for Colorado," Lucas reasoned. "And if he rode hard without having to be cautious like we've been." Hannah felt sick with fear. "If he's ahead of us, he could be waiting in Silver Creek. Or he could have continued on, thinking we went elsewhere." Lucas helped her mount her horse. "Either way, we need to be extra careful from here on." They left the trading post quickly, taking Hollister's suggested lower trail but remaining vigilant. Lucas insisted they travel only during daylight and make cold camps at night, no fires that might attract attention. The last 3 days of their journey were tense, every distant rider a potential threat, every small settlement a possible trap. Hannah found herself constantly scanning their surroundings, jumping at unexpected sounds. The carefree companionship they had developed gave way to watchful silence. On what Lucas estimated would be their final day of travel before reaching Silver Creek, they paused on a ridge overlooking a verdant valley. In the distance, nestled against the base of a towering mountain range, they could see smoke rising from chimneys, the faint outlines of buildings. "Silver Creek," Lucas announced, pointing to the distant settlement. "We should reach it by evening." Hannah studied the peaceful-looking town, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. What if Edwin's there? Lucas considered this. "We'll approach carefully. I know back ways into town, through the mining areas. If we see any sign of trouble, we can turn away before being spotted." As they descended into the valley, Hannah found herself moving closer to Lucas, drawing strength from his calm presence. Whatever awaited them in Silver Creek, She was grateful not to be facing it alone. They reached the outskirts of the town as dusk was falling, approaching through a stand of pine trees that provided cover. Lucas led them to a small stream where they could refresh themselves before entering the settlement. "My friend David's livery stable is on the far side of town," Lucas explained as Hannah washed trail dust from her face. "We can go there directly. Avoid the main street until we know it's safe." Hannah nodded, but as she straightened from the stream, she noticed Lucas wasn't looking at her. His attention was fixed on something beyond the trees, his expression suddenly alert. "What is it?" she whispered. "Riders," he said quietly. "Coming this way." Hannah's heart pounded as Lucas silently guided her behind a large boulder, their horses hidden among the trees. They waited, scarcely breathing, as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Through a gap in the rocks, Hannah could see 3 men on horseback coming down the trail they had just traveled. As they drew closer, she had to stifle a gasp of recognition. Edwin was in the lead, his face set in the determined expression she knew all too well. Lucas's hand found hers, squeezing reassuringly. They remained perfectly still as the riders passed within 20 yards of their hiding place, clearly following their trail toward town. "They'll realize we stopped here," Hannah whispered once the riders were out of earshot. Lucas nodded. "We need to move quickly. There's another way into town through the old mining camp. It's abandoned now, but the trail is still there." They retrieved their horses and moved swiftly through the gathering darkness, circling wide around the main road into Silver Creek. The abandoned mining camp proved to be a collection of dilapidated shacks and collapsed mine entrances, eerie in the twilight. Beyond it, however, lay the town proper, its windows glowing with lamplight. Lucas led them through back alleys until they reached a large stable at the edge of town. A sign above the wide doors proclaimed it Miller's Livery and Blacksmith. A burly man with a thick brown beard emerged as they approached, squinting in the dim light. His weathered face broke into a broad smile of recognition. "Lucas Thornton, as I live and breathe." "Sarah said you'd turn up eventually." "David," Lucas greeted him warmly. "Sorry to arrive unannounced." David Miller waved off the apology, his curious gaze moving to Hannah. "And who's this lovely lady?" Before Lucas could respond, Hannah stepped forward. "Hannah Summers," she said, deciding in that moment to use her own name rather than continue the pretense. "Mr. Thornton has been helping me relocate." Something in her tone must have communicated their situation, for David's expression grew serious. "Trouble following you?" Lucas nodded tersely. 3 riders just arrived in town. One of them is looking for Mrs. Summers. It's important he doesn't find her." David didn't ask for details. "Bring your horses inside. You can stay at our place tonight. It's behind the stable. Sarah will be pleased to see you, Lucas. She's been saying for years you need to settle down somewhere." As they followed David into the stable, Hannah felt a profound relief. For the first time since leaving the ranch, she was among people who seemed genuinely willing to help, no questions asked. David's home proved to be a comfortable 2-story house connected to the back of the livery stable. Sarah Miller, a plump, cheerful woman with kind eyes, welcomed them warmly, clucking over their trail-worn appearance and immediately setting about preparing a meal. While David took Lucas aside to discuss the situation with Edwin, Sarah showed Hannah to a small but clean bedroom upstairs. "You can wash up properly here," Sarah said, setting down a pitcher of hot water and a stack of towels. "I'll find you some fresh clothes. We're about the same size, I think." Hannah nearly wept with gratitude at such simple kindnesses. "Thank you. You don't even know me, yet you're willing to help." Sarah patted her hand. "Lucas brought you here. That's all we need to know." She hesitated, then added with a knowing smile, "Besides, I can see how he looks at you." Never seen that boy so taken with anyone before. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. It's not. We're not. Sarah laughed gently. No need to explain to me, dear. Whatever's between you is your business. Just know you're safe here. After washing and changing into a borrowed dress, Hannah felt almost human again. She descended to find Lucas, David, and Sarah gathered around the kitchen table, deep in conversation that halted abruptly when she entered. We were just discussing what to do about your situation, David explained. Lucas tells me this Edwin fellow has no legal right to force you into marriage. None whatsoever, Hannah confirmed. But he has influence with the local judge in Llano, and Texas law isn't always kind to widows trying to maintain property rights. Well, Colorado law might be different, Sarah suggested. And anyway, he'd have to find you first. Lucas looked up at Hannah, his expression somber. David's been into town. Edwin and his men are staying at the hotel, asking questions about new arrivals. They're offering a reward for information. Hannah's momentary sense of security evaporated. Then I'm putting you all at risk by being here. Nonsense, Sarah said firmly. Nobody in Silver Creek is likely to turn you in. We take care of our own here. But I'm not one of your own, Hannah pointed out. You are now, David declared, with a finality that brooked no argument. Any friend of Lucas's is welcome in our home. After a hearty meal, the first proper one Hannah had enjoyed in weeks, they discussed plans for the coming days. The consensus was that Hannah should remain hidden at the Miller home while they assessed Edwin's intentions and determined how persistent he was likely to be. Most men give up eventually, David reasoned. He can't search forever. You don't know Edwin, Hannah said grimly. He's obsessed with getting the ranch, and now, I suspect, with punishing me for defying him. Lucas, who had been unusually quiet during the meal, finally spoke up. There might be another way, something more permanent than hiding. All eyes turned to him expectantly. Judge Parker is in town this week, Lucas continued. He's a fair man, one who respects the law. If Hannah were to explain her situation, present evidence of Edwin's coercion. What evidence? Hannah interrupted. It's my word against his. You have the will, showing the ranch was legally yours, Lucas pointed out. And we have witnesses to Edwin's behavior, Charlie, Billy, Hank. We could send for sworn statements. David nodded thoughtfully. Judge Parker would listen. He's no friend to bullies, or those who try to circumvent proper legal processes. The discussion continued late into the evening, considering various approaches to securing Hannah's freedom permanently. Eventually, exhausted from their long journey, they retired for the night, Hannah to the guest room upstairs, Lucas to a small room off the stable where he had apparently stayed during previous visits. As Hannah lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, she found herself thinking not about Edwin or the danger he represented, but about Lucas. Throughout their journey, he had been her protector, her guide, her friend. But now, in the safety of the Miller's home, she realized her feelings had grown into something far more complex. She thought of the moment on the hillside when he had saved her from falling, the feel of his arms around her, the look in his eyes. What would have happened if he had kissed her then? Would she have welcomed it? The answer, she now realized, was yes. The next morning, Hannah woke to the sounds of the town beginning its day, horses in the livery stable, wagons passing on the street, voices calling greetings. After weeks on the trail, the normal bustle of a settlement seemed almost overwhelming. Sarah provided her with breakfast and more borrowed clothes, including a bonnet that would help conceal her face if she needed to venture outside. Though I'd stay in today if I were you, she advised. Lucas and David are going into town to speak with Judge Parker and see what they can learn about Edwin's movements. Hannah agreed, though the idea of spending the day hiding while others took risks on her behalf chafed at her independent nature. The men returned mid-afternoon, their expressions grave. "Edwin's still in town," David reported. "He's telling everyone you're his fiancée, that you were kidnapped by a drifter who took advantage of your grief over your first husband's death." Hannah's anger flared. "That's absurd. I barely knew Lucas before we left." "It's a story designed to gain sympathy," Lucas explained, "and it's working with some folks. The hotel owner's wife is particularly taken with Edwin's apparent devotion to finding his beloved." "What about Judge Parker?" Hannah asked. "He'll see us tomorrow morning," Lucas said. "I told him it was a matter concerning a woman's legal rights and potential coercion. He seemed interested, especially when I mentioned Texas law versus Colorado territorial statutes." That night at dinner, Hannah noticed Lucas watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. When their hands accidentally brushed as they both reached for the breadbasket, he didn't immediately pull away, and neither did she. Later, as Sarah and David retired for the night, Hannah found herself alone with Lucas in the kitchen. The silence between them felt charged with unspoken words. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything you've done. I wouldn't have made it this far without you." Lucas smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Hannah. You would have found a way." She shook her head. "Maybe, but I'm glad it was this way. I'm glad it was with you." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Hannah." A sudden knock at the back door interrupted whatever he had been about to say. They both tensed, Lucas immediately moving to place himself between Hannah and the potential threat. David appeared from the hallway, a rifle in his hands. "Stay back," he instructed, moving toward the door. "Who's there?" he called out. "Charlie Welch," came the reply. "I'm looking for Mrs. Summers. Lucas Thornton sent word to expect me." Hannah gasped in surprise. "Charlie, here in Colorado." David looked to Lucas, who nodded confirmation. "I sent a telegram from Clayton's Crossing," he explained to Hannah. "Thought we might need witnesses." David opened the door cautiously, revealing the weathered face of Hannah's ranch foreman. Charlie removed his hat as he stepped inside, his relief evident when he saw Hannah. "Mrs. Summers, thank the Lord you're safe. When Edwin came back raving about you being kidnapped, I feared the worst." Hannah moved forward to greet him. "Charlie, I can't believe you came all this way." The foreman shrugged. "Couldn't let that snake Edwin get away with his lies. When Mr. Thornton's telegram arrived saying you were safe but needed help, I saddled up right away." Charlie's arrival changed the dynamics of their situation. As a long-time employee of the Summers Ranch, and someone who had witnessed Edwin's behavior firsthand, his testimony would add considerable weight to Hannah's case before Judge Parker. The next morning, Hannah, Lucas, and Charlie presented themselves at the judge's chambers in Silver Creek's modest courthouse. Judge Parker, a tall man with silver hair and penetrating gray eyes, listened attentively as Hannah explained her situation: Thomas's death, the inheritance of the ranch, Edwin's attempts to force her into marriage, and their journey to Colorado. Charlie corroborated her account, describing Edwin's increasingly threatening behavior and the corrupt arrangement with Judge Wilson in Llano. "And you, Mr. Thornton," Judge Parker said, turning his attention to Lucas. "What is your role in all this?" "I witnessed Edwin Summers physically assaulting Mrs. Summers," Lucas stated simply. "I offered to help her escape a situation that was both legally dubious and physically threatening." Judge Parker considered this, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Mrs. Summers, do you have documentation of your late husband's will, proof that the ranch was indeed left solely to you?" Hannah nodded, producing the papers she had carefully preserved throughout their journey. "My husband was explicit about his wishes, Your Honor. He wanted me to have the ranch, not his brother." The judge examined the will carefully. "This appears to be in order. Under Colorado law, your rights as a widow to inherit and manage property are clear. Even under Texas law, a properly executed will should take precedence over familial claims." He set the document down, his expression stern. "What Mr. Summers attempted coercing you into marriage to gain control of property rightfully yours is not only morally reprehensible but legally questionable at best, criminal at worst." Hope surged in Hannah's chest. "Does that mean?" "It means, Mrs. Summers, that you have every right to refuse this marriage, and Mr. Summers has no legal basis to pursue you or claim your property." Judge Parker leaned back in his chair. "However, I understand he is currently in town, still seeking you. Would you like me to speak with him directly?" Hannah exchanged glances with Lucas and Charlie. "Yes, Your Honor. I want this resolved once and for all." Judge Parker nodded. "I'll have the sheriff bring him here this afternoon. Would you be willing to face him in my presence?" Though the prospect filled her with dread, Hannah agreed. This confrontation had been coming since the day she fled the ranch. Better to have it with the law on her side. When they returned to the Miller home, Sarah immediately sensed Hannah's agitation and insisted she rest before the afternoon's confrontation. Hannah tried to comply but found herself too nervous to sleep, her mind racing with all the things she wanted to say to Edwin, all the anger and resentment that had built over the months since Thomas's death. Lucas found her on the Miller's back porch, staring out at the mountains that surrounded Silver Creek. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, taking a seat beside her. "Judge Parker could speak to Edwin without you present." Hannah shook her head. "No. I need to look him in the eye, make him understand that he has no power over me anymore." Lucas studied her face. "You're not just doing this to be free of Edwin, are you? There's something more." Hannah sighed, realizing he had seen through to the heart of her motivation. "When Thomas died, I felt diminished somehow, like I was no longer a complete person without him. Then Edwin tried to claim me like property and I ran away." She turned to face Lucas directly. "I'm tired of running, tired of being defined by the men in my life. I need to stand up to Edwin myself, not hide behind the law or anyone else." Lucas reached out, taking her hand in his. "I understand, and I admire your courage." The warmth of his touch, the sincerity in his eyes, it was almost Hannah's undoing. For a moment, she wanted nothing more than to lean into him, to find comfort in his embrace. But the afternoon's confrontation loomed, and she needed all her strength for that. "Thank you," she said simply, squeezing his hand before gently withdrawing her own. "For understanding, for everything." The courthouse seemed smaller, more confining, when they returned that afternoon. Judge Parker greeted them solemnly, explaining that the sheriff had located Edwin and his two companions at the hotel and would be bringing them shortly. "I've asked Sheriff Rawlins to remain during this meeting," the judge added, "just as a precaution." Hannah nodded gratefully, taking a seat beside Lucas and Charlie at the long table in the judge's chambers. She wore her borrowed dress from Sarah, her hair neatly pinned back, determined to present a composed, dignified appearance despite her inner turmoil. When the door opened to admit Edwin, flanked by the sheriff and his two hired men, Hannah felt a surge of the old fear, followed immediately by anger. Edwin looked much as he had in Lano, thin, sharp-featured, his eyes cold and calculating. His gaze fixed on Hannah with a mixture of triumph and fury. "There she is," he exclaimed. "I told you she was here. Hannah, what has this man done to you? Are you hurt?" The performance of concern might have been convincing to strangers, but Hannah saw through it immediately. "Stop the act, Edwin. It won't work here. Judge Parker raised a hand. Mr. Summers, please take a seat. This is not a reunion, it's a legal proceeding. Edwin complied reluctantly, his eyes darting between Hannah, Lucas, and Charlie. What is this about? I've come to retrieve my fiancée, who was kidnapped from our home. That is precisely what we're here to discuss, Judge Parker said firmly. Mrs. Summers has presented a very different account of the situation, one supported by documentation and witnesses. Over the next hour, the judge methodically dismantled Edwin's claims. He referenced the will, Charlie's testimony about the events in Lano, and Hannah's own clear statement that she had never agreed to marry Edwin and had, in fact, fled to escape coercion. Edwin's facade of concern gradually gave way to open anger. This is absurd. She's a widow, distraught over my brother's death. She's not thinking clearly. And this drifter, he jabbed a finger toward Lucas, took advantage of her vulnerable state. Mr. Thornton has acted as Mrs. Summers' protector, not her abductor, Judge Parker corrected. And Mrs. Summers appears perfectly lucid and rational to me. Edwin's face reddened. She's my brother's widow. The ranch belongs to the Summers family. The ranch belongs to Mrs. Hannah Summers, as clearly stated in your late brother's will, Judge Parker said, his patience visibly wearing thin. Your attempt to force her into marriage to gain control of that property could be construed as criminal coercion, Mr. Summers. Edwin's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger as he realized his position was weakening. Hannah, he said, turning to her with forced gentleness, you know Thomas would have wanted the ranch to stay in the family. He wasn't thinking clearly when he made that will. Hannah met his gaze steadily. Thomas knew exactly what he was doing, Edwin. He knew you saw the ranch as nothing but a possession to be acquired. He built it for us, for me, not for you. You can't run it alone, Edwin insisted. You're just a woman. She won't be alone, Lucas interjected quietly. She has friends here, people who will help her, not exploit her. Edwin sneered. Friends? Is that what you call it? How long did it take you to seduce my brother's widow, Thornton? Lucas half rose from his chair, but Hannah placed a restraining hand on his arm. That's enough, Edwin, she said firmly. Your lies won't work here. I came to Colorado of my own free will to escape you and your schemes. Judge Parker has confirmed that you have no legal claim on me or the ranch. And what about the ranch? Edwin demanded. You've abandoned it. By rights, it should pass to me as the next male heir. Judge Parker shook his head. Mrs. Summers has not legally abandoned the property. She fled under duress, which does not constitute abandonment in the eyes of the law. So what now? Edwin asked, looking between the judge and Hannah. You expect me to just go back to Texas empty-handed? That is precisely what I expect, Judge Parker confirmed. Furthermore, I am issuing a legal order forbidding you from harassing Mrs. Summers in any way. Should you attempt to force this unwanted marriage or make any claim on her property without proper legal proceedings, you will face charges here in Colorado territory. Edwin's face contorted with rage. This is outrageous. I won't stand for it. You have no choice, Mr. Summers, the judge said coldly. Sheriff Rawlins will escort you and your companions to the edge of town. I suggest you start your journey back to Texas immediately. For a moment, it seemed Edwin might physically resist, but a glance at the sheriff's hand resting on his pistol apparently convinced him otherwise. This isn't over, Hannah, he said as he rose to leave. That ranch should have been mine. Thomas knew it, you know it. The ranch was never going to be yours, Hannah replied calmly. And now neither am I. Goodbye, Edwin. After Edwin and his men had been escorted out, Judge Parker turned to Hannah with a kinder expression. Mrs. Summers, you are legally free to remain in Colorado or return to Texas as you choose. Your late husband's will is valid here, and I will send official correspondence to the county court in Leno, clarifying your legal rights to the property." "Thank you, Your Honor," Hannah said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I'm grateful for your fairness." Outside the courthouse, in the late afternoon sunshine, Hannah felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine freedom. Edwin was gone, the threat he represented neutralized by Judge Parker's authority. She could stay in Colorado, return to Texas, or go anywhere else she chose. "What will you do now?" Lucas asked as they walked back toward the Miller's home. Charlie had gone ahead to share the news with David and Sarah. Hannah considered the question. "I'm not sure. I could go back to the ranch, I suppose, but, Lucas prompted when she hesitated. "But I'm not sure I want to," Hannah admitted. "These past weeks, traveling with you, seeing new places, it's shown me there's a whole world beyond Leno, beyond the life I knew with Thomas." They paused at a small bridge spanning a creek that ran through the center of town. The setting sun gilded the water, casting long shadows across the wooden planks. "Silver Creek seems like a good place," Hannah continued, looking around at the bustling settlement. "Growing, full of possibilities. I could start something new here." Lucas leaned against the bridge railing, studying her face. "You'd be welcome. The Millers already consider you one of their own." "And you?" Hannah asked, finding the courage to ask the question that had been growing in her mind throughout their journey. "What will you do now?" "Move on to the next job, the next town." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes contemplative. "I've been thinking about that, about what you said earlier, being tired of running." He turned to face her fully. "Maybe I'm tired of it too, been drifting a long time now." Hannah's heart quickened. "Are you saying you might stay in Silver Creek?" "I'm saying I might," Lucas admitted, "if there was someone worth staying for." The implication hung between them, clear but unspoken. Hannah took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Lucas, these past weeks, getting to know you, it's been unexpected," he suggested, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, unexpected, confusing at times." Hannah met his gaze directly. "I wasn't looking to feel what I've started to feel for you." Lucas moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "And what is that, Hannah?" "Something I thought had died with Thomas," she admitted softly. "Something I'm still trying to understand." Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The gentle touch sent a shiver through her. "I know it's soon," he said, his voice low. "I know you're still healing from losing him. I wouldn't rush you, Hannah. But I want you to know these feelings. They're not one-sided." The admission, simple and honest, filled Hannah with a warm certainty. Standing there on the bridge, the man who had rescued her from a forced marriage now offering her something entirely different, something based on choice, on mutual respect, on growing affection. "I think I'd like to stay in Silver Creek for a while," Hannah said, smiling up at him. "See what might develop, for both of us." Lucas's answering smile was bright enough to rival the setting sun. "I'd like that too." He didn't kiss her then, though Hannah thought he might. Instead, he offered his arm, and together they walked back to the Miller home, where Charlie, David, and Sarah awaited them with celebratory dinner. Over the next few weeks, Hannah settled into life in Silver Creek. With Judge Parker's help, she established legal control over her affairs, sending instructions to Charlie, who had returned to Texas, about managing the ranch in her absence. Eventually, she decided to sell the property, using the proceeds to purchase a small building on Silver Creek's Main Street, where she opened a mercantile shop that quickly became popular with the town's growing population. Lucas, true to his word, remained in Silver Creek as well. He took a position at David's livery stable, his natural way with horses proving invaluable as the business expanded to include breeding and training. In his spare time, he helped Hannah establish her store, building shelves and counters, offering advice on dealing with suppliers. Their relationship developed gradually, naturally. Evening walks along the creek, Sunday dinners with the Millers, quiet conversations on the porch of the small house Hannah had rented near her shop. Lucas was patient, never pressuring, always respectful of the grief she still sometimes felt for Thomas. 3 months after their arrival in Silver Creek, on a crisp autumn evening, Lucas asked Hannah to accompany him on a ride outside town. He led her to a beautiful piece of land overlooking a small valley, where a half-built cabin stood among towering pines. "What is this place?" Hannah asked, dismounting to explore the clearing. "Mine," Lucas said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Bought it last month with the money I've been saving all these years." Hannah turned to him in surprise. "You're building a home," Lucas nodded, taking her hand and leading her toward the cabin. "I've been working on it weekends. David and some of the other men have helped. It's not much yet, but it's wonderful," Hannah said sincerely, inspecting the solid foundation, the carefully hewn logs. "Your horse ranch, that's the plan," Lucas confirmed. "Good grazing land, plenty of water, room to expand." He hesitated, then added more softly, "Room for a family someday." Hannah's heart skipped at the implication. "Lucas." He faced her, his expression earnest. "Hannah, I know it hasn't been very long. I know you might not be ready. But I wanted you to see this place, to know that I'm putting down roots here, that I'm not going anywhere." Hannah looked around at the half-built cabin, the beautiful land. The future Lucas was creating a future that could include her if she chose it. "When Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over," she said slowly. "The part where I could love someone, build a life with them." She turned back to Lucas, finding it easier now to say what was in her heart. "I was wrong. You showed me that." Lucas stepped closer, his eyes hopeful. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm falling in love with you, Lucas Thornton," Hannah admitted, the words bringing with them a sense of rightness, of coming home. "And that cabin looks like it could use a woman's touch." The joy that spread across Lucas's face was answer enough, but he pulled her into his arms anyway, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, Hannah. Have since somewhere on the trail here, though I tried not to admit it, even to myself." This time, when he lowered his head toward hers, neither of them held back. Their first kiss was gentle, then deepening with shared emotion and promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Not now, not if you're not ready, but someday. Promise me someday." Hannah smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Yes," she said simply. "Someday soon." 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, Hannah Summers became Hannah Thornton in a simple ceremony in Silver Creek's newly built church. Sarah Miller wept happily. David stood proudly as Lucas's best man, and even Charlie Welch traveled from Texas for the occasion, bringing news that Edwin had finally given up his claims and moved east. The cabin on the hillside had been completed, a cozy, welcoming home that reflected both Lucas's sturdy craftsmanship and Hannah's eye for comfort. The first few horses of their breeding operation grazed in the paddock below, while Hannah's mercantile in town continued to thrive under the management of a capable assistant whenever she was away. As they stood on the porch of their new home on their wedding night, looking out over the land that was now theirs together, Hannah leaned into her husband's embrace. "I never imagined when you helped me disappear that night that we'd end up here," she said, tilting her face up to his. Lucas smiled, drawing her closer. "I think some part of me knew even then. Not where we'd end up exactly, but that you were someone worth changing my whole life for. No more drifting, Hannah murmured. No more running, Lucas agreed, kissing her softly. Just this, us, building something together. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant colors, Hannah Thornton reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her here from the grief of widowhood, through the threat of forced marriage, to this new beginning with a man who had helped her disappear into the night and find herself in the process. 2 years later, the Thornton Ranch had expanded significantly. Their breeding operation was becoming known throughout Colorado territory for producing exceptional horses, while Hannah's mercantile in town had grown to include a second location. Silver Creek itself had continued to prosper, attracting more families and businesses as silver mining operations expanded. On a warm summer evening, Lucas returned from town to find Hannah sitting on their porch swing, a contented smile on her face as she watched their 1-year-old son, Thomas David Thornton, playing with wooden blocks on a blanket at her feet. "You're looking mighty pleased with yourself, Mrs. Thornton," Lucas observed, joining his wife on the swing after dropping a kiss on their son's head. Hannah's smile widened. "I have news." "What kind of news?" She took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "The kind that means young Thomas here will have a brother or sister come winter." Lucas's face lit with joy. "Truly?" "You're certain?" Hannah nodded, laughing as he swept her into a tight embrace. "Dr. Fielding confirmed it this morning. I wanted to tell you in person." Later that night, as they lay together in their bedroom, the windows open to catch the mountain breeze, Lucas pulled Hannah close against his chest. "Happy?" he asked softly, his hand resting protectively over the new life growing within her. "Completely," Hannah assured him, nestling into his embrace. "It's a far cry from where I was 3 years ago, isn't it? Facing a forced marriage, planning to run away alone." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "Life has a strange way of working out sometimes. If Edwin hadn't tried to force you into that marriage, we might never have met," Hannah finished. "I might never have found my way to Silver Creek, to this life." She twisted in his arms to look up at him. "I used to think losing Thomas was the end of my story. But it was just a chapter closing with another waiting to begin. And many more chapters ahead," Lucas promised. As they drifted toward sleep, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from a widow forced to flee in the night to a woman who had found not just safety but love, family, and a future full of promise. Whatever chapters lay ahead, she would face them with Lucas by her side, their story continuing to unfold in ways neither could have imagined on that fateful day when a determined cowboy had helped a desperate widow disappear into the night.